Okay, we finally got it. All right. So today we're going to talk about this form. The form is the addendum concerning the right to terminate due to lender's appraisal. For the folks that was not here during COVID, this form was widely used and used a lot. Back when 2020, when everybody was trying to do whatever they can to get a property, it was a popular form because this is showing the sellers that they were willing to waive the appraisal or do something, regardless of what the appraisal come in. They were saying, okay, hey, the buyer, okay, I'm going to still purchase this property regardless, and that's what it's used for. To show there's different variations. We're going to talk about the different variations. However, this form is really just saying, hey, as a buyer, this is what you're willing to buy this property, consummate the sale, even if it didn't appraise at this value. And that's what it's really for. Probably the most important thing is you look at the form, it says use only if the third party finance addendum is attached to the contract and the transaction does not involve FHA or VA. All right, so you cannot use this form for FHA buyer or a VA buyer. And the reason you can't use this form because it's a government backed loan and they have to have the right to terminate if it doesn't appraise. Right? That's simply put, you can see all the verbiage in there, but simply put, FHA and VA buyers have to have the right to terminate if it doesn't appraise. So you cannot, I say again, you cannot use this form for FHA and VA. So the first alarming thing, if you ever see this, so you're on the listing side and you got a FHA loan or a VA loan, and they come in with this is not, you can't use this form with that loan. So that's really the big thing. Is I should just have one person to allow people in and shut people off. Maybe one day I might get to that point and that level, right? Maybe one day. All right. Anyway, so you got to put the property address at top, of course. And then the next thing that says, okay, the finance described in the third party addendum attached to the contract for the sale of the above referenced property does not involve FHA or VA. They're telling you again. They tell you at the top. They tell you again. They say it two times, and you'll be surprised how many times we'll see this form being used for FHA and VA. Okay, so let's go into the first waiver. The first waiver. It says waiver, buyer waives buyer's right to terminate the contract under paragraph 2B of the third party finance addendum if the property approval is not obtained because the appraisal does not satisfy lender's underwriting requirements. If the lender reduces the amount of the loan due to the opinion of value, the cash portion of the sale price is increased by the amount the loan is reduced to the appraisal. So this one right here, this is simply put, it's like a full waiver. Right? It's saying, hey, we don't care if your house is this. We're going to use this as an example throughout this whole thing. If the house contract price was $300,000 and the opinion of value, the appraisal came back at $200,000, the buyer is saying, hey, I'm still buying. That's a full waiver. Everybody with me? Any questions on number one before I go to number two, which is probably the most confusing? Okay. Anybody in virtual land before we go further? Please ask. No questions?
No, we're good. Continue.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Somebody out there. All right. Partial waiver. So the partial waiver is saying, okay, it's simply, I'm going to explain it before I read it. Price at this amount or higher, we're going to go ahead and we're going to consummate the loan. We're going to finish. So they put a number there that says, okay, hey, it has to appraise for this amount or higher. And the buyer is saying, hey, I will go forward and I will still purchase this house. 2B of the third party finance addendum, if the property approval is not obtained because the opinion of value in the appraised does not satisfy lender's underwriting requirements, and the opinion of value is blank or more. So that's what that one's used for. So example being, let's go back to this $300,000 property. We got a contract for 300 process. We're under contract. The appraisal comes out, and let's just imagine for a second, I don't know if I can type something in there. They said, okay, hey, look, as long as it appraises at 275, and they have to click in this box, right? So we got a contract for 300,000. We go through the process, the appraisal comes out, and it appraises for that same 200,000. Now the buyer can terminate and get their earnest money back because it didn't. Now let's say that same contract, 300,000. It comes in at 275. The appraisal comes in at 275. They are buying. Okay, they are buying. Now I'm going to talk about some numbers on this because we got to understand how these numbers and what we really get into this whole process. Here's where the problem comes in. And this is what we don't calculate. Sometimes we don't talk to our clients when we use this. So let's say let's use the same deal. We got a contract price for 300,000, right? It comes out at 275. But the pre-approval from the lender, 90% LTV, loan to value, right? So let's play along with this. So 90% means that the lender will loan 90% of the value. Well, the value is 275 now. Even though we have a contract price of 300,000, the value came out to be 275. They would only loan 90% of the 275, even though your contract is up at 300,000. So now this is where we was having so many problems in terms of working with buyers during that time because it appraised at 275, and somebody give me 90% on 275 real quick.
90%.
Is it
75? 247.
247. I was like, man, you good. So the lender would only loan up to 247. Okay. So now the difference between 247 to 300,000, this buyer has to make up this difference. What else we don't know about in this whole process? All the other closing costs or whatever comes along with this whole process with the buyer. So when you start to get in this phase of this, those are the conversations you got to start having with buyers if they're going to start to use this, especially on the conventional loans, because they usually have a pre-approval with some form of, hey, 90% LTV or 95% LTV or 80% LTV on conventional loans. The LTV is loan to value, but the value until when? The appraisal comes out. So this is where we're talking about with these things. And again, another reason why VA and FHA doesn't allow this is because of those particular reasons. So when you start talking about costs and you really estimate costs, that's a pretty big gap, right? That's a huge gap between 300,000 and 275. And now, hey, Mr. Buyer, you got to come up with, in this case, the difference between the 300,000 to 245, maybe about another 2.5% on closing costs to close this loan. Now, was people doing this during COVID? It was happening all day and every day. Okay, all day and every day. It was happening out the wazoo. So that's the partial waiver. Any questions on the partial waiver before I go into the last one? Give you guys time in virtual land to unmute yourself. Any questions?
No questions.
Okay. Anybody else? All right, let's keep on going. Okay, now the third one, and to me, I think the third one is similar to what's already in the third-party finance addendum in paragraph 2B. It's very similar, but you're just doing this additional right. It says, in addition to the buyer's right to terminate under paragraph 2B of the third-party finance addendum, buyer may terminate the contract within blank days of the effective date if the following occurred, right? So in this regard, we're saying, okay, hey, once this comes out and we get this value, now we're saying, hey, the buyer gets this additional amount of days if the following occurred. The first thing says the appraised value according to the appraisal obtained by the buyer here, real quick. Let's say we put 7 days there and we got the same $300,000 house, and you talk to your buyer and the buyer says, okay, hey, look, you did all the math. You did all the math. And the buyer says, okay, look, I got a 90% LTV, right? And I know exactly how much I got in my bank account. That same house. Now they're saying, hey, we're willing to go 292 for this purpose. And now what it's saying there now is the appraisal came out less than 292. Okay, less than 292, they can get their money back. But if it came out 292 or higher, they would consummate the loan. And if it came out less than 292, they would have 7 days to terminate in addition to. All right, so this is where this form kind of comes into play, where you're talking with your buyers and really getting to their finances about what they can and can't do. And you're having this conversation, they really want this property, and they're willing, even if it don't appraise at a certain number, you could throw any number in there you wanted to, right? But this is where, hey, we have $31,000 to buy a house. Well, you do all the calculations to make sure, even if it don't appraise at $300,000, we could go $298,000.45. Okay, if it did that or more, we have the money to do this, and we put that number in there because we make sure we're good. But if it didn't, then we want out. Okay, so that's where the three different ones. Number one is a full waiver, no matter what it appraised to. Number two is a partial. And number three is, hey, you're getting right down to the weeds and tedious numbers of what we're doing about, hey, it has to appraise here or more. And if it does, not, we're out.
From your experience, what would they say less?
Huh?
What would they say less?
Why this form was written less?
Yeah, wouldn't it be better for them if it was less?
No, this is just saying, I think paragraph 3 is just about understanding exactly how much the buyer's willing to come up with in the difference if it didn't appraise. All right. Similar to 2, but it's just really getting more in the weeds and giving them more time to make a decision. I think that's the big difference between 2 and 3 to me, is that they're almost the same, but this one just giving them that extra additional right to terminate, like it says, based on some real financial calculations. And that's the way I see it. I don't know if anybody else see it differently, but that's the way I've always seen this. And this is a conversation you have with the buyers. Hey, look, what can you really do? Or not what they can do, what they're willing to do. Now, this came into play big time in 2020, where we was fighting for properties and we standing outside open house lines and looking like we're going to the food stamp place. It was crazy. Okay. Standing people to wait to get inside the house. Okay. So that's what was going on at that time. Now, the form was out way before that, but it just came to real usage, or came to play, when it started having this buyer frenzy that we was having in COVID. Now, is people still using this form today? Of course, it's FHA and VA. Short, easy form to me, but I'm going to open this up for any questions to anybody.
I got a question.
Sure.
This seems like the section 3 that you just put in there. It seems like it's something that you would want attached pretty much all the time. The way that you phrased it on there, is that true, or is that? Am I explaining it right? Like to protect your buyer.
Correct. For a conventional loan, this would be a good practice for, especially for a conventional loan, having this form for section 3.
Okay.
Do you have to have it? But you look at the conventional loan, this would be the best practice to have it for a conventional loan.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Oh, yeah, so what's interesting to me, Ben, is when we first started using this form during COVID, I think it was used so that the buyer can be more competitive. And I did learn later that the primary use of this form is to protect the buyer when they have a conventional loan.
Correct.
During COVID, what was the most that did you see using this form?
Oh, so I was working with a buyer that he was willing to go about 50K above the asking price. That's the most I saw. I don't know. Valerie probably got more experience, a little bit more than actually not. Valerie, what's the most you saw during COVID?
Oh, I saw it all the time. I was actually just going to piggyback on what Martez said. I think it does protect the buyer, but it also protects the seller if you choose paragraph 1, because then the seller is guaranteed that the buyer's not going to back out whether it appraises or not.
All right, folks, that's short and sweet to the point. Nothing more than that, unless you guys got some questions. I am going to remind people, I'm going to put a video out later, but reminder, hey guys, we cannot post other people's listings from other brokerages without permission. I want to put that out there again because we having problems with that again. You more than welcome to go out to any listing and do your own video and walk through it and do stuff like that and push your own video out. That's your video. You can do that. You can post that. But when it comes down to posting other people's listings, you got to have permission from the broker. I always tell people if that's what you want to do, just make sure I'm on a CC'd on it and get permission from broker to broker, and then we'll go from there, right? But we're having an issue with it, so I know we got a lot of new folks and they don't know. You can be fined up to $5,000 if it's an issue. So don't get called out there doing that, all right? If you got questions before you post, call. Just call, okay?
Can I share something, Ben?
Sure. Yeah.
So we have, I know in finals, once they're complete, everyone is more than welcome to that is going to be part of the EGL sales team. You guys can sit and market those properties and that internal builder. But additional to that, guys, we have over 12 internal listings that we need to push. So I highly encourage you all, let's focus internally as a company and help each other push those homes versus our competition. Yes, you need permission from your broker. Yes, we need to make sure that we market it right, but why would you go somewhere else? We have them in-house. Let's help each other push these properties more coming up. And we're going to do the same thing when you bring in those listings as well. So let's really push that. I think we can do something really good as a company. And I encourage you guys to look inward before you expose other home builders.
Appreciate it, Valerie.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ben.